Alma and welcome to my book journey. So today I am doing my April wrap-up video, and I've read quite a few books this month, and this month or last month in April I did kind of like a mood read for the month, and I had a ton of pile possibilities that I posted for my possible mood read April. And I had a ton of books, so many books. I had a bunch of library books. I had a bunch of books that were, had been on my shelves for a long time. And then books that I had, just been wanting to read for a long time, just haven't had time to do it. And so I thought this would be the month, that I would read some of these books that I had been looking forward to reading. Well, one thing I hadn't counted on was my Libby, the Libby app, because I always put request in for books, and I had quite a few that came in all at the same time, and I'm like, oh well, I want to read these, because there was a couple, well, there was 2 books that came in on my Libby app that I had requested, and they're brand new books for this year, and they were actually 2 books that were in my 2025 upcoming books that I was interested in reading. I did a whole video. I'll link that below if you're interested. It was a video talking about all the books coming out, not all the books, but a lot of the books that were coming out in 2025 that I was interested in. Some Christian fiction, historical fiction, and so 2 books that have come out at the beginning of the year were finally available on Libby, and I just had to read them. So they weren't in these 2 books were not in my April TBR video because I didn't know they were coming in. So those got added on, and then some other books that I hadn't, I think those were the only 2, I think maybe, that I hadn't really planned on reading that just jumped on it. But so because I read so many books this month, I decided halfway through the month to record what I had written. So I always say written. I don't write anything. I read them. But what I had read so far in the month of April, and so I recorded a video. I think there are 4 books in this, the first 4 books that I read of the month. So I'm gonna go ahead and put those in here so you can hear about those books that I read. And then I'll come back, and then we will hopefully quickly just run through these next books. I think I'll try not to be too wordy. Sometimes I go overboard on these wrap-ups. I'll try to keep it short and sweet. Okay, so let's hear what I read at the beginning of the month. So it is halfway through April. It's the middle of the month, and it's actually Palm Sunday. And so we had a wonderful time at church service today, Palm Sunday service, and then my son took us out for lunch, and now it's just a quiet time. I came home and I finished one of my books, and so I wanted to do like a little wrap up of the first books I've read this month while they're kind of fresh in my mind, so that by the end of the month I'll just add, when I do my wrap-up video, I'll just add the rest of my books to it. But now that these are kind of like fresh in my mind since I've recently finished them. So the first book I finished this month was Station 11. And so I'm again doing my mood reading, and this is a book that I've been wanting to read for a long time. And it was so funny because this was not what I thought it was. For some reason, I thought this was going to be like a sci-fi book about space because of the title, and maybe I read a part of it that had to do with the title, which is kind of a sci-fi, but really that's not the main part of the story. And so this book is actually like a dystopian, futuristic tale about something about the world after it has gone through a major pandemic. And I thought this was really interesting because this book was written before COVID happened. This was written or published in 2015. So this was 5 years before COVID hit. And this book was, of course, this is an extreme pandemic because compared to what we experienced in 2020. So this is about a flu that originated in Russia, in the state of Georgia there, and they called it the Georgia flu. And this flu was so horrible and terrible because like if you were caught it like within, and you started having symptoms of it, you were pretty much dead within 2 or 3 days. That's how fast it was. And I think they said it was like 98 or 99% of the world's population was killed due to this flu. And so this book is about 20 years after the pandemic and the experiences of the main character is a young woman by the name of, oh gosh, what's her name? I should have, is it Kirsten? I think it's Kirsten. And she, when the pandemic hit, she was about 8 years old at the time. And then so now she's, like I said, 20 years after the events of, you know, everybody, the world collapsing. And I thought, you know, because you know, within days, people started losing things, and like power went out, electricity, and then water. And I was talking to my husband. I was like, because of a flu and people dying, would you know, the lights and all that, and computer and stuff, they'd lose all that, and they didn't have any. The cars weren't working anymore. The gas. And he goes, yeah, because if so many people are dying, there's not enough people to work to keep everything going, keep all the grid going, you know, everything, government, everything was, and because I don't usually read dystopian books like this, so he's like, yeah, and he does, he reads a lot of dystopian books, and he goes, yeah, a lot of times this is what happens, you know. And I was like, oh wow, it's like within 20 years, they didn't have cars anymore. And the main thing of the book was transportation, because they didn't have cars. And, you know, today in our society, we can, you know, get on a plane and fly across the country. They had no planes flying either. They had no cars flying. So if you wanted to get somewhere, you had to either, if you were lucky enough to have a horse, which those died off too, if you were lucky enough to have a horse, you can get so far. But other than that, you were walking. And so you were not walking far distances. And then because so many people died, people congregated into small little communities, and instead of living in the big cities, which were scary, you know. And so this story is about, like I said, this young girl, and she is traveling, which I thought was so interesting. Of all the things about dystopian peoples, and she was part of a group, and they were called the Symphony, and they would travel through towns, you know, and they did have a horse that could carry their things, and they had a big company, and they would travel to these little places, these little communities, and they would do a play, and they would play music, and like an entertainment for the people. And the interesting thing was, at first they did like they tried to do modern plays, but then they realized that the people really liked Shakespeare. And even though it was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old, they could relate better to it, because and they thought, and they questioned that, and they thought, well, you know, it's a classic, you know. There was something about the plays and the things of Shakespeare that transcended time, you know, and people really enjoyed that. And so this is, like I said, is a story that takes place 20 years after that flu and her party, and they get mixed up with what they call a man that's like, says he's like a prophet, and he, you know, there's always good guys and bad guys in these kind of dystopian worlds. But the one thing that was interesting about this book is the way it was written, and some people might not like that, because we go back and forth through different times, different points in time, to weave in a story. And this reminded me, if you've ever seen the movie or the TV show Lost, if you watched like all the episodes, all the seasons, a lot of times in that show Lost, like all the characters somehow were interwoven, like they knew people, they were connected in ways they didn't even know, like they knew somebody, or they were connected with somebody. Everybody was like all connected somehow. Well, that's how this book is. And there's a character in the very beginning of the book, when the day that the pandemic kind of came to the United States. He was an actor on a stage, and he has a heart attack on stage. And his character, you don't realize it when you first start reading it, but his character is like the glue at the very beginning, and he is connected to so many people throughout this story in a different way. And then you don't see that until, you know, at the end of the book, you see how they were all connected. And I enjoyed that part of the book. That part, how everybody was connected, and how the story of how they just survived during this time, which was, you know, pretty sad to see the world that way. But we do have a little glimmer of hope at the end, which I enjoyed. I was glad of that. Now, I did see that this was turned into a television thing on, not television, but a streaming, one of the streaming sites did a show about it. And I watched the trailer to see, oh, okay. And I could see the characters, but I did see that they combined some storylines that were not, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, those two, they didn't even meet in the book, or they didn't have any, but yet they're in the book, in the movie, they put them together kind of to combine stories. But a lot of it kind of, you know, I could see it, you know, from the book, what they were doing. I don't know if I would like it as much, because sometimes when they change things from the book, it kind of bothers me. But I don't know if I'll watch it or not. Okay, so that was the first book. I did enjoy it, but like I said, it was, this whole Station 11 has really, it's like has to do with a graphic novel that one of the characters actually wrote in the book, but wrote like before the pandemic hit, and that's where that name comes from. So it has nothing to do with science fiction. It's a dystopian book. Okay, so there's that one. The second book I finished, so I'm just looking at my note here. The second book I finished was a book I don't have. It's so funny. I had ordered it on Pango and everything, and then it got lost in the mail. I never received it. The gal that sent it to me, you know, I could see it like in the tracking area. It got so far, and then it just never came. And then after 30 days, Pango Books gave me a refund, but I was like really bummed because I really wanted that book. And that book was a book by Carrie Taransky, and it's called No Ocean Too Wide. And so I saw that it was on Libby, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna listen to this. And I found it on audio on Libby, and this was a great audio book that I listened to. And I listened to it so fast because it was such a good story. And the book is about let's see, I'm trying to think what the time frame was. Maybe in the early 1900s, maybe. Oh, I wish I should have wrote it down. But anyway, it was about a family living in London, that the mother was ill, and she was so sick that she had to be taken to the hospital. Now, she was a widow, and she was the only one that was caring for her 3 children. She had a boy and a girl, twins, and then a younger child. And then she had an older daughter, but the older daughter did not live with them. She was already an adult, and she was working as a lady's maid for a very wealthy family at the time. So she was not living in London. She was living in another city in England. So since the mom was in the hospital, there was nobody to care for the children. So they took them and put them into like an orphanage or like a home. And at this point in time in history, and that was the only bad thing about this audiobook. You know, a lot of times books will have like an author's note and tell about the reason they wrote this. And this is a historical fiction, Christian fiction, historical fiction. This, they would usually say, you know, if this really happened, and since the audiobook didn't do that, it just cut off at the end, and that was it. So I imagine that this really did happen, but back then they would send children, orphans, to Canada. all the way from England. They would send them to Canada because Canada needed people, and people needed children to help them, work their farms or whatever. But mainly it was for Canada just needed more population during that time. And so they would just, ship off these orphans. And it was kind of reminding me of the Orphan Train book that I read, where in that case it was children in New York, orphans that were sent by train across to the Midwest in countries and farms, or farms in United States that needed, so the children could get out of the city and live on the farms and things. So this family, even though the mom was alive, they still sent the kids over. So it was the boy and the girl that were twins, a brother and sister, and then their younger sibling, the little girl, she was the youngest. And they all got sent to Canada, and then they were all sent to different places. They didn't even keep them together. And the older sister, the book is about her trying to go and find out first she has to find out what happened to them, that they even were sent to the home, and then then she finds out that they sent them to Canada, and then somehow she has to make a way to go to Canada and find her siblings. And it's just it's a heartbreaking story. And along the way she meets she meets the man, the son of the family that she's working for, and he's such a wonderful character in this book. He's so helpful to her, and even though he's wealthy and everything, he helps her, gives her money, and tries to help. He's an attorney, a solicitor, and he wants to help her legally to help her get her brothers and sisters back. So anyway, I highly recommend that book. It was such a good book. And then there's a second book, and I looked to see, after I finished reading it, I looked to see what the next book is about. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So I would tell you, but then I'd be spoiling the first book for you. But I'm on the lookout. Then I could not find that on Libby, the second book, or in the library. So I'm just going to have to, try to find it. Okay, so that was the second book I read. Great book. And then the third book I finished was a middle grade book called Operation Happy by Jenny L. Walsh. And this was such a sweet book. And I love the beginning because it says here, let's see, it says, has a little doggy, and it says, for dog lovers everywhere, don't worry, Happy is going to be okay. So it gives you a head up. Okay, Happy's going to make it. He's going to make it through this book. This is set during right before, during World War II, but before the United States gets into the war, because the little girl and her family, her father is in the Navy, and they get stationed to Pearl Harbor. And so she is there. Let me remember her name. Let's see. Her name, the dog is named Happy, and her name is, I want to say, is it Peggy? I should just read here. No, Jody. Peggy's her sister. So it's two girls and their mom and dad, and they're living in Hawaii. Like I said, they got stationed to Pearl Harbor, and of course they're there when the bombing of Pearl Harbor happens and their experiences. And I thought that was what the book was going to be about. The whole thing was going to be about them in Hawaii, dealing with the before and after of Pearl Harbor. But the book is actually split in half. Half of it is in Pearl Harbor, and the second half is what happens afterwards. And they get shipped off, off to San Francisco to get away from at least the families got sent away because of the danger. And so she is with her mom, because her father stayed, of course. He's in the military, and during wartime, he's going to be with all the other Navy, they're not soldiers, sailors, there in Hawaii. And so it's her situation, living by herself, well, not by herself, living with her mom and her sister and Happy. And her mom is going through some depression because of what's happening. And so the two girls are having to kind of like fend for themselves and really try to keep their family together. And her dad even tells her, I'm going to put you in charge, you know, keep the team of the family together. And so it was a really sweet story, and it is at the very end. This one did have an author's note, and this book, it was based on a young girl's experience in Hawaii at the time, and talking about other children and how they dealt with this, and you know, when they used to do the emergency air raids, and they would go in the bunkers and everything, and just everything they had to go through. So that was a really great book. I really enjoyed that one. Okay, and then after that, I read, let's see, okay, the one I just finished is called An Overdue Match, and that's another one I checked out on Libby, and it's by Sarah Monson. It was so good. This is my second Sarah Monson book. This is this is a new release. It came out in February of this year, and this was one of my on my list of books that I was anticipating for the year of 2025, and it was such a good book. It is about a young woman named Evangeline, and she has alopecia, and that is the disease. It's an autoimmune disease that affects your hair on your body. And she started as an adult. She got this, and she started losing her hair, like it would just fall out in clumps, and until it was so bad that she just ended up shaving her head, and her hair never grew back. But not only her hair, she also lost her hair on her skin, her eyebrows and her eyelashes she lost. And so, of course, for a woman, losing your hair would be very devastating. And then on top of it, at the time that she contracted this disease, she was engaged at the time. And after she started losing her hair, and she started, you know, she was bald and lost all her hair, her fiance I guess he wasn't attracted to her. He couldn't handle it. So he called off the wedding, and he took his ring back, and he broke up with her. And of course she was devastated. And then she was hurt so bad that she moved away to a different town, like kind of start all over again. She was wearing wigs, and she had her fake eyelashes, and she felt like she was a fake person because she had to do all her makeup in such a way. And like I said, with the wigs, wear a wig. And she felt unloved and unwanted, and that nobody would ever love her again because her fiance had basically said she was not unlovable, and it hurt her so bad she was devastated. So she got a job as a librarian, and she was working there, and then she meets our love interest of the book, and his name is Ty, and he kind of had a similar story. He grew up in that little small town that she moved into, and he was grew up with asthma, and he had asthma as a child, and it was pretty bad. And sometimes, you know, he would have attacks, and his mother was like a helicopter mom around him, and wanted to keep him safe. So by doing this, she wouldn't let him do things. So he wouldn't be able to do like the things he wanted to do that boys want to do. And so she kept him as in a bubble almost, so that to protect him. And then as he got older, as like teenagers do, he started rebelling a little bit, and then he moved away. And then years later, as an adult, he came back to his hometown, and he had a tattoo shop, because he had tattoos all over himself. He even had a tattoo on his neck. So when our girl Evangeline first encounters him, she's kind of like, oh. So these are like two people, you know, that are judged by people. Like sometimes you see a person that has tattoos all over, and right away you want to think that they're bad guys. And that's how he was. He had that kind of, you know, people thought of him in that way, you know, if they didn't know him, you know, the first impressions and that kind of thing. And then because he had a tattoo shop too. And now her, the same way, and she hid it, but she knew that if people would just see her without her wig on, you know, how are they going to judge her? You know, what are they going to think about her? Are they going to pity her? And all of that. So they had similar stories. And so the book is about them. meeting and their relationship and what happens. And Ty is such a beautiful, really great character that tries to show Evangeline that, you know, she is worthy of, you know, worthy of love, and not to believe the lies that people have put into her psyche and her heart, that she is lovable, you know, people will love her and she's beautiful, you know, that part, you know, to tell her that she was beautiful. And so it was really good. This book, I started reading it by myself on Kindle, on my Kindle, and then I was telling Kenny about it, and then the last half of the book, or actually almost most of the book, I was reading it to him, and he was like, "Oh, this is gonna happen and this is gonna happen." He figured everything out, but it was really good, really great book. And then I saw that it's part of a series, and the next book comes out in November of this year, so I'm looking forward to that, to see how the story is going to progress. And I think the series has to do with the library, I believe, other people that work in the library. But I want to hear more about their story, to see what happens with them. Okay, so those are the books I've read so far this month. And so I will come back and tell you how I finished off the month and what other books that I read in my mood read April. Okay, so those were the first 4 books I read of the month, and I had some really good ones there at the beginning, and I really enjoyed that rom-com that I read, and the book by Taransky. I can't think of her first name, but anyway, really love those books. Okay, so after that, I want to talk about this book. This was not on my TBR, but this is a book that I reread, and I actually read it with my daughter, and we kind of did a March, and then we finished it off in April, and this was Anne of Green Gables. So this was my second read of Anne of Green Gables. I read it last year, I believe, and last year I read it, and I also listened to it on audio, and I don't think I got enough. I don't think I appreciated it as much last year. So, but this year, because like I said, we were doing it as a read aloud and reading only a couple chapters a day and talking about it, I really enjoyed it the second time around. And I love this beautiful copy that I picked up. And so me and Ellie, well, she didn't, I can say she didn't really enjoy it as much as I did. But I really enjoyed the character of Anne, and I really want to go forward and read the next, because it's a series of books. I'd like to keep going and reading, and I don't know when I'll get around to the next one. I really would like to find the rest in this, what is it called, the Tundra covers. I love them, they're so pretty. So I've been kind of keeping my eye out for them. I got this one on Pango, so I kind of look through Pango sometimes, or you know, you never know if you can come across them in a thrift store. But so that is another book that I read in April. Okay, then I read my jar pick for the month, and this was Jen Turano's A Match in the Making. And this one even though I had the book, I actually listened to it on audio, because I was reading so many books. I wanted to try to read more on audio, or listen to on audio, so that I can get them all in. And I like listening to them audio because I could be doing other things around the house and still be listening. And the audio was really good. The audio on this one was really good. The narrator and everything was really good. So this was the story about this gal. Her name is Gwendolyn, and she is actually from like a high society, but she's kind of not telling people that she is, because of things that happened in her past and her family and everything. And she's working for a matchmaker, and then this matchmaker hurts herself, and so she tells Gwendolyn, hey, you know, instead of just being my assistant or whatever, I want you to actually work with me and do most of the matchmaking. And at first she doesn't want to do it, but then she gets a taste of it, and she realizes that, hey, you know, she can really match people up. And of course there is a gentleman, his name's Walter, and he's a widower, and he has some children, small children, and he's starting to realize that he actually needs to find a wife, because of his children are getting older, and he needs somebody to, you know, take care of him. But he's not really looking for love, he just wants somebody to take care of his kids. Well, this story reminded me so much, it gave me the Sound of Music vibes, because and of course in The Sound of Music, the is it the govern, is that what is she called, the governess? I can't remember, or the nanny or whatever. She, you know, falls in love with the children in that movie, and they all love her, and then the dad ended up falling in love with her, and that's what this one was like too. So the kids all fell in love with her, as you know, they just loved her because she was such a sweet lady, and just she could relate to the kids and was very loving towards them and everything. And of course you can tell she kind of had some feelings for the dad too, but she didn't want to pursue it because she was trying to match it. You know, he was one of the clients to get matched up. So that romance was cute too. So this is the first book in this series, The Matchmakers, book 1. So I don't know if I'm going to continue on with the story, the thing. If I happen to, you know, check it out from the library or something, maybe I'll continue. But this was my first book by Jen Toronto, and it was okay. I enjoyed it. Okay, the next book I read was Vivid by Ashley Bustamante. And this book, this cover is so beautiful. This one was really good. And I do have books 2 and 3 on this one, so I definitely will be going on in this series. And this is called the Color Theory series. And this gave me, even though it wasn't quite like it, it gave me Caraval vibes. It made me have that feeling. And I loved that book, Caraval. The stories are not the same. It just reminded me of that. So this is about a world where we have people that have powers that have to do with colors. And so we have red and blue. And so people that have can manipulate or use the red colors are they can do, like, has to do with physical strength and going fast and things like that. And then the people that are blue, they are what they call, are my notes in here? I wrote down my notes for myself while I was reading it. They can, like, manipulate, like, move things with their mind and change things and create things. And then there's a yellow. But yellow is mental. They were called mentalists because they could manipulate or get into your mind or make you do things and things like that. But in this point in time, I guess back in the history, all 3 colors were, you know, coexisted. But something happened in the past when they got rid of all the yellows, or they made, they didn't want the people with the yellows to use their power on others. So it's kind of forbidden. And so the way you had that within you to use these colors, and if you saw like something with red, you could pull the red out of that for your power. So in this place, they didn't have anything yellow anywhere. It was like forbidden to have anything yellow because they didn't want somebody that was a mentalist to use the yellow for their purposes. But okay, so, and then our main character, her name is Ava, and she is a red, so she can manipulate the red and have power, strength, and speed. And she's at a school that is training all these kids to use their powers. And then we have our bad guy is named is Elm, E-L-M, Elm, and he is a yellow mentalist that has escaped from somewhere, and he is being hunted down, and they're trying to find him. Well, Ava comes across him, and she meets him, and instead of being afraid of him, like, because he's the enemy, she wants to get to know him and learn about the yellow. And in doing so, she starts uncovering some secrets and things. And as soon as I started hearing that, I'm like, oh, she's going to find out, like, history is not how she thinks it is. And then it goes on from there. And we have a love story that's like, that happens towards the end. I mean, I kind of felt something was going to happen between them, and it does happen. And that was really, really sweet. So it has a little sweet romance in there. So I am excited about going on because we had a little, you know, it left us at a cliffhanger of what's going to happen. And then so I'm definitely going to read the next book. So this was a great, great book. Okay, next book. This one is in Another Time by Jillian Cantor, and I read this with my husband, and we both enjoyed it. I think me more so than him. I think he liked it, but this one was so good because the ending was not what I thought. It just really surprised me, and I loved it. Well, I didn't love it because I was like, oh, as soon as there was a one sentence that happened towards the end of the book that I'm like, oh, great. Now I know how it's going to end. And it did happen that way. But anyway, so this is a book about a woman. She is a a Jewish girl that lives in Germany, and she is a violinist, and she's really good. But this is happening right before World War II starts, and Hitler starts doing, all his rules and laws about Germany, about the Jewish people and everything that's happening. Well, she, at the time, she is in love or dating a German man, and his name is Max, and her name is Hannah. Yeah, Hannah. And so they are having a relationship. They love each other, but he wants to save Hannah because he doesn't want her to see, go through, what everything's happening with the Germans. And he actually has foreknowledge of it because he has access to some kind of time travel. And so the story is him wanting to save her. But the way it's written, you go back and forth between two time periods. Hannah, in the very beginning of the book, she wakes up and it's like 10 years after the war has ended, and she wakes up in a field and she has no knowledge of the past 10 years, and she doesn't know what has happened to him. So you go from her in where she's at in the 10 years in the future, and then the other timeline is Max, and that starts off when they first meet many years ago. And they kind of, eventually those times come back together. It's really good. I enjoyed the way it was written, the way it was going back and forth. And like I said, the ending turned out to be totally different from what I thought. So very good. I really enjoyed this one. So if you like historical fiction, if you like fantasy and time travel, I would get this one. And it was, for the most part, it was clean. There was some scenes, but it was not like full on anything like that. It was very like, it wasn't closed door, but it was not very explicit. I mean, for the relationship. Okay. The next book I read was our Tammy's, from Protagonist Pub, her book for the month that was picked, and it's Out of the Easy by Ruta Sepetys. This is my third Ruta Sepetys book. I read Salt of the Sea, which I absolutely loved, and the other one, gosh, I can't remember the other one's name. I'm trying to look at my bookshelves over there, but it's not, it goes with Salt of the Sea. But anyway, oh, maybe it's in here. It is no, she didn't have her books in here. Anyways, it's on the back of this one. Between the Shades of Grey. Okay, Salt of the Sea and Between the Shades of Grey. That was the other book I read. So this one, I did like the story. I mean, I like her writing very much. I did not, the story was, I guess the themes of it. It was about a young woman. I think she's 18, and she grew up with her mother, who was a prostitute and living in New Orleans. And her mother is horrible. She's a horrible individual. She was definitely the bad guy in this book. And even though her mother treated her poorly and brought her up in this kind of environment, our girl, what is her name? Josie, is a good girl for the most part, and she wants better for her life. She does not want to do what her mother has done. She's very smart. She works during the day at a bookshop, and then at night, or in the early morning, she goes and cleans up the brothel where her mother works. And but she doesn't want, even though she's aware of that lifestyle, of course, because her mother does it, and she has friends within that lifestyle, she does not want that for herself. She wants to go to school, and not only go to college, but she wants to leave Louisiana altogether and go up back east to go to like a woman's college or something, just to get out of that environment and make something of herself. And so during that, while she's trying to do that, you know, she has to make money, she has to, you know, get accepted, but yet she has that stigma because of who her mother is. So I did enjoy the story and the way it, you know, it kind of turned out, but like I said, it's kind of, you know, it's kind of sad to read about people that way. And the main madam, she wrote her like I guess she's like one of those people, what do they call those characters? They're like a gray character, because she was good to Josie. She treated her well, and she protected her in a way. And anytime people needed help or needed whatever, she was always there to lend a hand, or somebody money or whatever. But yet at the same time, and she was making her money off of these other young women that were selling their bodies at the brothel. And yet you know, she was, I don't know, it's like, you know, what they were doing is not a good thing. But yet they made it seem like if they didn't do this, then they'd be out on the streets and who knows what. And so this was her way of having these ladies protected, but yet they were still, yeah. So I didn't like reading those kind of stories to make it look like it was a good thing. And I don't think the author made it look like it was a good, all the way good. I guess she just wrote it down the middle, the gray, you know, like for these women, it was their home, but yet it was also something that even our main character, Josie, didn't want to do, you know, because she saw that it was not a good life. And then also and I guess the main, whereas the madam was like the gray person, her mother was portrayed as the totally evil person, because everything she had no redeeming qualities at all. But anyway, so this is not my favorite Ruta Sepetys book, but I was glad that I read it, and it's a YA book, so I was like, wow. But yeah, so it was good for the most part. Okay, the next book I read was a book called, I'm looking at my notes, sorry. I don't have this one. This is the other book that came through on Libby that was a new release. I think it came out in March, and it's called Ace Marvel Spy, and this is by Jenny Walsh, and she also wrote Operation Happy, which I read earlier in the month. And so Ace Marvel Spy is based on a real character, and she was oh gosh, I wish I would have wrote down her name. Now I can't remember. But she was a tennis player in the 1940s era, I believe. And yeah, right around World War II, I think. And she came from meager, you know, her family was not wealthy or anything, but she was a good tennis player. And somebody gave her an opportunity to go into that, and a woman actually was supporting her and paying for lessons and things, and then she ended up being her coach, and she went all the way to like Wimbledon and things like that. So she is a very, I mean, she's very ambitious, she tries really hard, but she also has some medical issues that she deals with throughout the story. And then she also later on, turns out the government comes to her towards the middle end of the book, because the book is just like goes through her life story from her becoming first starting to be in the tennis world, and then her fame and everything. And then later on in life, they ask her during when the war's going on to be a spy and spy on somebody that she actually and the reason they come to her is because the person they want spied on is somebody from her past. And then, so the book does jump back and forth between her younger days when she's starting out, and then in the other timeline. So it is kind of dual timeline because it's jumping back and forth between her life. And so at first I didn't like that, but then I kind of caught on because they were explaining things in the past that she was mentioning in the future time, or the future time. So I really enjoyed that book. I really like this author, Jenny. I think it's Jenny Walsh. But so that was the book I read for that. And then the next book I read, another book I read that I don't have the book, is 10 Days in a Madhouse. And this is a book that I ended up reading for Anne in Search of Wonder, her classics reading challenge, because for the month of April, the prompt was a memoir, a classic memoir. And so I chose this one because it was a memoir of it's called 10 Days in a Madhouse by Nellie Bly. And so this is a true story, her memoirs that she wrote back in the 1800s. And the reason I picked that was because last month I read Jamie Jo Wright's book, Misty Wayfarer, and it had The Curse of Misty Wayfarer, and it had in it a quote from this book that I read, because part of that Misty Wayfarer book had to do with people in asylums and how asylums were run back in those days really horribly. So Nellie Bly in the 1800s, she was a famous journalist, and she went on to write a bunch of different stories, but this is one of her books that she released, her memoirs. She wanted to, and she was brave to do this, she wanted to do a journalism article about how asylums were run back in those days, specifically how females were treated and everything in those asylums. So she went to her editors or whatever and said, I want to do this. I want to pretend to be insane and see if I can get thrown into an asylum. But I want to make sure. And they were like, yeah, do this, and then you can report everything that you see and, do this big old story. But she said, okay, but you have to make sure you get me out of there. Don't leave me in there. And they were like, oh yes, we will, we'll set a certain time and then we'll come and get you. And which was, oh my goodness, I read a similar book. Oh gosh, it was a Christian fiction book. I'll put it up here, so I can't remember the name. It's by Joanne Politano, but it was about a woman that went into an insane asylum that was not insane. She went in there for, I can't remember, she's trying to find somebody, and then her experience. So it kind of reminded me of that. But this was a true story. This Nellie Bly actually did it. And so it's a really short memoir, and she just talked about the 10 days that she was in there. And the thing that struck me was, number one, how easy it was for them to throw her in the insane asylum. She didn't even act like over the top or anything. They just put her in there. And she was supposedly interviewed or examined by several doctors, and they all just, put the stamp and, send her off. And what she wrote and how the women, because she was, of course, just with the women, how they were treated was so horribly. And it wasn't so much really the doctors. At least the doctors just came in every once in a while, asked a few questions or whatever. But the women, the nurses they were just abusive, so abusive to these women, just horribly. And there was women in there that she knew that were, yes, they were insane. But there was other women like her that were just there because of circumstances. There was a woman that spoke German and nobody could understand her. So let's put her in there. So they didn't even know, her circumstances, and nobody could understand what she was saying. And there was another young woman that was like down in her luck, and she was just, I think she was just homeless and at the time and needed help, and then they threw her in there. So it was really a really good book. Like I said, it's really short and interesting that she went through all that. And yes, at the end, they did get her out, and then she did a whole story about it. And then because of that, they did a big investigation, and they went back in. They went in there, I think, like 2 weeks, maybe later afterwards, to do an investigation. But the place, somebody gave them a heads up, so they tried to clean out everything that they could to make it look presentable, because they had these women and hardly anything clothes wise, hardly where they slept was horrible. The very cold temperatures, a lot of people were very sick. And so also she specifically had names of patients, and when they went back in there, suddenly some of these patients that she wrote about were mysteriously gone, and they were saying they were never here. So it was really, really sad. But it started at least people to investigate those facilities and start making some changes. So she did what she did. She's very brave to go in there, and which is amazing that she went in there and did that. Okay, so there's that one. The next one is, let's see, is my two books for my journey through time. I read for the 1940s? Yes, I think 1940s. Oh my, why did I pick this book? It was horrible. It was horrible, really. But I read the whole thing, and my daughter was like, well, why didn't you DNF it? Well, it was from my reading challenge, and you know, other people decided to read it. It wasn't a horrible written wise. It was just a really depressing and down story, and that is George Orwell, 1984. So I mean, there was no good guys in this book at all. Everybody's bad guy in this book. And there was I'm gonna be spoilers, because this book is not, there's no good or happy endings for sure. This guy, George Orwell, he did not have a I was gonna look him up, and I think I'll look him up later, but he just did not have a good idea of how the future was going to be for him. So he wrote this a long time ago, and he thought, you know, by 1984 society's going to be done. You know, I mean, this to me portrayed the worst society could happen. I mean, everything was really terrible. It even says it's a nightmarish vision. It was a nightmarish vision, because there was no, it's like a truly godless society, and with no hope. I mean, everything was so grim and ugly, and they had, the government was just, this particular government was changing history, rewriting history, and making people, even though they said they technically did not have laws, they did keep people in their places. And a lot of the sayings that were in this book were like, oh, so that's where it comes from. The whole big brother is watching you is from this book. Thought police is in this book. What was the other thing? They had the way they were rewriting the English language. They talked about going in and changing books and saying, you know, pretty soon we're not even going to recognize Shakespeare or all these classics, because we're going to be changing all these things. And I thought, you know what, they're already starting to do that in our day and time, which is kind of sad. It's like, yeah, this was to the extreme. But you can see, like, some things, yeah, here it is. It says whole literature of the past will have been destroyed. Chaucer, Shakespeare, Milton, Byron, they'll exist only in newspeak versions, not merely changed into something different, but actually changed into something contradictory of what they used to be. And nobody will know the difference. They were changing everything to suit their needs, for that, keeping people in their place. And so we had people were just propagandized into believing all these things. And what was really bad was they would turn on each other, even family members, especially children. Children would turn in their own parents into the government to be taken away, and they, that was a good thing. It was just, the whole book was just terrible. The main character is Winston, and he kind of sees that things are not right, and he thinks about the past and wonders, how it used to be, and he even goes at one point, finds somebody that's really, really, really old and tries to get him to say, do you remember what it was like, when you were a kid, the capitalists and the government were like the really bad guys, and they got rid of them. And so he's like, do you remember how it was? And just yearning for something. So in the beginning, he kind of has some kind of hope. And he's hoping that eventually, somebody will rise up and overturn this terrible big brother government. And supposedly there's this organization like resistance fighters or something, but nobody really knows who they are or if they even exist. So that's what this book's about. I guess I can say, yay, I read it in 1984 in a classic, but it's definitely not my cup of tea. One of the ending part had a really awful torture scene that was really bizarre, and yeah, it was crazy. So if you read this book with me in April, thank you for reading it, and I'd love to know what you thought in the comments below. Okay, so my other book for my journey through time for this century's much better book, at least for me, is it was a reread for me. It was Amy Harmon's Girl Called Samson, and so I love this book. The second time around, I read this a couple of years ago, and as I was reading it, I was like, oh, I forgot this, and I forgot that part in the book. And this is about a young woman who disguises herself as a man to enlist in the army during the American Revolution. And yes, that's part of it. That's a big part of it. But also just her character is so beautiful. Deborah, she was a young woman from hardship, really from hardship. Her parents, I'm trying to think, I believe she was the youngest, and then she had some older siblings. And when she was around 5 years old, her dad left the family, just left, ran out, didn't want to be married to the wife anymore, and he left the family. And at that time, there was no, welfare or, what happened to these widows with all these children. So back then, what her mom did was she sent her children off, all of them, to different places as indentured servants. And so she was an indentured servant until she was 18. So the first place they sent her, she was sent with a widow woman when she was 5, and she lived there until she was 10 years old. And the widow woman took care of her, but she wasn't very nice to her. And when she was 10 years old, the reverend that took her to the first place took her from that environment and took her to a family that had a farm that had 10 sons. And the mom wanted a woman. Mom needed help on the farm, and so she was indentured. She was 10 years old, so she wasn't adopted. She was an indentured servant, and so she helped the mother out, and didn't go to school either. But she was raised up with the boys, kind of like a sister, and she was such a tomboy because she had all boys. They taught her how to shoot. They taught her all, she just grew up with the boys. She was just comfortable with them. And at one point when the war started kicking in, and the colonists, wanted their liberty and freedom, a lot of the sons went off to war. And she wanted to do it too, because she wanted to fight for liberty, but she knew she couldn't do it as a woman, and that's why she ended up disguising herself as a man. But what she enjoyed, it wasn't so much that she wanted to be a man. You know, she still wanted to be a woman. She wanted what being a man gave her. And that was just the freedom to walk along the road by yourself and just to do what you wanted at that point in time. And for her, a woman couldn't do that, and plus she was an indentured. Well, when she entered into the war, she had already served her indenture. She was 20-something years old, but so she went. But since she was pretending to be a young boy, she told everybody she was 16. But there is a lot of letters that go back and forth in this book as well between her and a woman named Elizabeth that was so important in her life. And then there's a beautiful love story that happens in here too that just, you know, she was not expecting to happen to her. Just overall, just a really wonderful book. And I hopefully some of you were able to read this with me this month, and if not, I highly recommend this book. If you it's just my favorite Amy Harmon book, for sure. Okay, I think that's all of them. I think let me go through here, and that one. Yep, I did start reading A Night to Remember. I forgot to pull the book. It's a book about the Titanic. Me and my daughter were reading it this month, but we're not quite done with it. We just have a little bit left. So I'm going to roll that over to May. So we did read that, and that one's really good too. Okay, so before I go, I just wanted to say real quick what all those books counted for all my challenges that I did this year, or am doing this year. So of course I talked about my decades one, my jar pick. So the book that counted for, oh, I guess I'll just get my book journal here and go through all of them so I don't forget. Okay. So for the biblical retelling challenge for cat stories, I read through the book of Psalms this month. And then for biblical studies, I mentioned in my May TBR that I'm rolling over my gospel book for April. I haven't finished it, so I'm just rolling that one over too. And then for Chantel Reads All Day, her Read Your Bookshelf Challenge, the April prompt was flowers, and so I did Vivid because it has a flower on it. So that counted for the April. Then this floral cover also counted for Oshina's Read Christian Romance, and I chose the floral cover for her. She has a prompt for a floral cover. And then Jane Reads, her prompt for her Christian fiction reading challenge for April was A New Author to You, and that was, I chose No Ocean Too Wide by Taransky, and that's perfect for her because Jeanette actually recommended that book to me to read, and I'm so thankful that she recommended that one because it was such a good book. And then, like I said, Anne in Search of Wonder, her April prompt was Read a Memoir, and that was the 10 Days in a Madhouse. And then for book lover Amanda, her Southern Comfort Reading Challenge, the April prompt was a book with flowers on the cover, and that was also Vivid. So I used that for 3, so I was super happy about that. And then during the month of April, there was Katie's Spring into Movies reading challenge, and so I'll put my graphic up here of which ones fit for that, and I got all but 2, and I was really close to one of them. So Singing in the Rain was a character who sings or plays an instrument, and that was my In Another Time because she played the violin. Bambi animal on the cover, I was Operation Happy because Happy was a little dog. And then Miss Congeniality, romantic suspense. I chose Ace Marvel Spy because that spy part was kind of suspenseful towards the end. So I used that one. Number 4, Big Fish. I didn't get that one. A book over 400 pages. A Girl Called Samson was like real close. It was like 390 something. I was like, darn it. So came real close on that one. You've Got Mail, epistolary novel. I did use A Girl Called Samson for that one because there was a bunch of letters in, and I had forgotten about that. There was a bunch of letters in that book where she was writing to her friend Elizabeth and other people. So that was, I used that for that one. And then Easter Parade, a character with a hat on the cover, and that was a match in the making. She's got a beautiful hat. And then this was another one I didn't get, Secret Garden, and it was, and I thought I had it because I thought it was flower on the cover, but it was actually flower in the title. And none of my books had a flower in the title. And then 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. It's a family stories. And for that one, I used No Ocean Too Wide because it was about the family of the young girl trying to find her brothers and sisters in that book. All right, so that is it. That is all the books that I read for the month of April. So I had a wide range of books from beginning to the end. I said the beginning, I started with Station 11, which was like a dystopian book, and I ended 1984 is actually the last book I read of the month, and it was it's like, what a way to end it, right? But so right now I'm already reading like a really funny, sweet rom-com because I need something fun after reading that downer of a book. All right, so let me know if you've read any of these or what's your favorite book that you read for the month of April. If you read any of my Journey Through Time books, especially if you read 1984, or if you've read it before, I'd love to know what you thought about that. And thank you so much for watching this long video. And yeah, that's it. You all have a blessed day. Thank you so much.